Hello, good morning, everybody, or good evening, depends on when you watch this. This is Toby. Welcome back to the channel. I thought lots of you guys maybe stay at home a little bit more than you're used to due to up-to-date reasons. And let's have a look at another scene. I thought you might be interested in what I've been up to. I'm expanding on this little film that I've been doing. And think one of those times it's a good time to learn a little bit more about Blender and how to do some cool grease pencil stuff in it. So today I'm gonna talk a little bit about how to make a looping background. So I'm gonna show you the scene very quickly that I have set up here, and then I'm gonna walk through how I achieved that. So let me hit play very quickly. It's like this guy drives away, beast comes, jumps over and dives into the other side. So this is the shot. And now you notice here on the left and also on the right side, we have a bunch of buildings that go from the foreground into the background as the cyclist drives down the road. And obviously, this is not a giant object, but it's like a selection of, on this side, it's 5 different buildings, and on this side, it's 4 different buildings that are looping around constantly. And so how did I achieve this? Let me show very quickly. Now the thing is taking its sweet time. Now we're back. All right, so let me get to the overview. So this is the scene as it looks from the perspective camera. I hit play here. You see how those buildings are in fact moving. So the first thing I did in this scene was to put the background plane in here, which is like this big university building, Miskatonic University, which is like slowly receding in the background. This is nothing like unusual. I just like mapped it from the front. And as you see, like I have to work a little bit more on this in the future, just to expand the sky, put this building on a proper plane of its own with an alpha. The interesting stuff is happening here. So what is this? This is a set of little geometries. If I click this little icon here, I can toggle on and off basically all the little scene helper objects, like the dummy objects, the grid and stuff. I usually have it toggled off whenever I render like viewport previews put into the edit. But like if I click this, you see what exactly is going on. So those are all the same planes. The objects look a little bit like this, and each of those planes has a little camera, a little projection camera that is hovering in front of it, this one here. And what I did with those cameras, I used it, as I explained in my last video, to project texture onto the building. So if I move this one around here, you see that the image is moving because this is what throws the texture on this building. Let me just undo very quickly. Yeah, so back. Then what I wanted to do is I knew those things had to move around in the scene, right? So Blender has a very nice feature that is called parenting. So if you want one object's transformation to influence the other, what you can do is you click first the objects that you want to follow the first object, in this case this camera here, to get behind the invisible planes, select the camera. And then you click the object that you want to be the parent, that you want to be the governing entity if you want. So you click this one here. Then you press the P key on your keyboard and it brings up this little menu here. And you click set parent to object. Click this. It is already done right now, so I won't do it. But if you click this, if you see, I'll move this around, the little camera there, this one, it follows the plane wherever it goes. And when I put an animation on the plane, the camera will follow and the projection will always stay the same. Okay, cool. So we have this set up. And once I did this for one house, I copied it 5 times and I made a bunch of different buildings to map on there. So basically decided for some view like that, like I did with the other scene. And I drew some of those houses to map on the plane. I made sure that this line here, this edge of the building, is roughly in the same spot for all the images. I can show you how this looks like. Those are the textures for it. So as you can see, I started with a house like this, and then I expanded it with a couple of more buildings, with an alpha channel. Very simple, just a sketch with the bright side and the shadow side separated into two planes, so it's like easily readable. And the nice thing is, once I have this set up, I can just like go with Photoshop and paint those a bit pretty, and they will automatically update in the Blender scene if I overwrite the files, and that way I can like basically polish my animation without even touching the file. So now it's the question, how do we loop those? So what I did, I built, in this case, little clusters of my 5 different houses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then what I could have done is I could have animated it from the foreground, moving into the background. But I wanted to have a little bit more control over it. So I told you about this parenting thing. I made another parent because you can build little chains there. So I took all those buildings and I created a little empty object, which is basically just an object for like handling other things. It won't be rendered. It is just a viewport handler. You can do this by going on add and go on empty and add a little, I chose a cube. There's several different geometries, but cubes, what I'm used to back from my 3D Studio Max days, basically. And same thing. I clicked the child, and then I clicked the parent, press P, and I parented them all to this helper object. And these are the objects that I animated. You see down here in the dope sheet, for example, those things here, they don't have any animation. This thing here is what has the animation. So how do we, the reason why I did this, exactly. So again, if I move this one, all these houses will follow, and the little cameras with the houses. And the reason why I wanted to do it, that is because I wanted to have the freedom to, after the animation was done, to make little adjustments to the houses. Because right now, if I move this, or let's say if I scale that up or so, and then I skip the timeline, it will revert to its original state because I set a keyframe and the program will remember the keyframe and put it back into the state that is defined by the keyframe here. Here you see all the data, the location, rotation, and the scale being like keyframes marked by this being green. It means there's a keyframe there. If I do this under a parent, I have, after I've done the animation, I have still the options to, for example, take this house here, and let's say I want to make this a little bit, whoa, sorry. Let's say I want to make this a little bit bigger. Maybe want to shove this upwards. I can still do this, and as you see, the animation will still remain as it is, but the house will have its new data. Just undo this very quickly. Undo. Yeah, go. Cool. So I have this, and then I wanted to create a loop animation. And the way I did this was I basically put all those controllers in the same position, like this. Okay, just gonna undo it again, just like skipping the timeline will revert to the original state. Then I just imagine I have this still as it is. I grabbed all those controllers and I animated this arc that you see here, basically starting from here, shoved it here in the middle, and then shoved it to the back of the scene where the animation would end. I made this little arc because if I go back to my camera, what I don't want to happen is in the background I don't want people to see those houses disappearing. Basically, I don't want there to be like a pop, pop, pop effect when those things disappear into the nothingness. So you see down here, you still, outside of the area that is rendered, you still see the houses disappear. Whoop, now a cluster is gone. Still see it a little bit, but it's like negligible. I think people won't look at this very much. And I can maybe hide it in fog later on or so. But what happens when I make a little arc is like, instead of just like moving in a straight line and then disappearing back here, they will move to the like off screen or like to the direction of off screen before they disappear. That helps with like creating this illusion that it's like a continuous street that he's driving down. And then after I was finished with doing this animation, I selected this and then I went to the graph editor. So you have several timelines that you can select down here on the screen. and one of them is the graph editor, this guy here. And as you see, here's the keyframes. What you can do in a graph editor is select all your keyframes that you have, and then you put channels, and you choose extrapolation mode, and you click make cycles. So it doesn't show up right now, those little handles. Usually I get a little change in display here, don't know why. But what that means is basically when an animation is finished, it will start off from the beginning again. It will do so until infinity. What I can do then, after I've done this, imagine like I did this with all the cubes here, just like doing the, oh yeah, here you see it, like the infinite style. Shove them all in the same position, so they all those clusters move basically at the same pace back there, jump at the beginning, and rinse and repeat. And what you can do then is select it, go back to the dope sheet because it's easier to handle this. Then you take the keyframes, and then you click W to select your moving tool. And then you can shove around those keyframes because they're looping infinitely. It doesn't really matter when they start and when they end. And when you see, when I do this, it changes the position because it's jumping to another part in the timeline. This is how I can basically move it. So they all used to be here, right? And then I moved it just a little bit to this direction. Then I did it with the third one. So we have this infinitely looping thing here with the buildings. All right, really cool. So obviously there was some adjustments necessary to make it look as it's supposed to, but that's why I did all this parenting. And then in the end, to have a final, basically a God controller for all this, I took all those controllers and parented them a third time to this guy here, which is like the controller that has all this like animated slice down here. So I can, it's a really robust system actually in Blender, so I can rotate it. I can also scale it up and down. For example, if I see like, oh, my houses are too small, or they like stuck a little bit too far inside of the road or so, that is like not a big issue to change it in this manner. Speaking about scaling, that is also a very cool thing that you can do with things like that. Timeline, you can select your controllers. Whoop, that was wrong. Controllers. This one, and here you see, let me flip this close. This is like all the animation that's happening on the left side here. I selected all the controllers. This is all the keyframes that they have. Let's say now I look at my little film here, and I see, so now this is like very well adjusted. This is exactly how I want it to be. But let's see, oh, somebody's calling me, sorry. Let's say I want this to be a little bit slower or a little bit faster. So what you can do is press R to select Scale tool, and you can scale the keyframes in this timeline. You can scale it, for example, right? So cursor over the timeline, press R, and you see the cursor change to two little arrows, and I can say like scale, come on, please, please scale this up. Since they all loop, you see now it's way faster, way too slow. It's way too slow. We undo this. Do this. There we go. So this is the proper speed that you want at the same thing. We can scale it down, and it's going to be super way too fast. So this is some cool ways you can adjust your animation with still being able to like take all your assets and basically reposition them, scale them up and down, and what have you. I have another thing that loops in here. I had the visibility turned off all the time since I made this demonstration because it's really hardware intensive. And this is the street. Here you go. You see the street, and the street has some stones on it, some cobblestones. And when I skip the timeline, you see that those cobblestones are also moving along this street. So how did I do this? The houses are all separate entities, while the street is like one continuous patch. And what is the best way to achieve something like this in Blender, I made an animated texture. And the way I did this, maybe there's like smarter solutions, but it's the best solution I found, is I created a texture for the cobblestone. This is like a little bit into Photoshop territory, but it's like interesting nonetheless. So you have a couple of cobblestones right here. Yeah? So I painted this, and Photoshop has this very nice feature that's called filter other offset. What offset does is it takes your image and it basically shoves it out the one direction of the screen, and what is shoved out comes back in on this side. So as you see, I can shove it and you never see a seam. Just as a quick demonstration, but for example, because usually it start out that way, if I make a little smiley face and I shove it out, shove it, and you see it comes back in this side, right? So what you do, you paint those cobblestones, except for the last row, basically. You omit those ones at the edge. Takes a while. Then you shove it out. And then if you have this on the screen center, you can paint your extra cobblestones that fit in this edge. And if you shove it back, basically by putting the same offset but with minus instead of plus, then it's back where it's supposed to be. Let's just go back to the beginning here. All right. So what is important here is if I go to my document size, you see that this document is 4096 times 4096. I chose that higher resolution because there's a couple of shots where I'm gonna be really close to the street with the camera, and I didn't want the resolution to suffer. So this is also the reason why I have to click the visibility on the street off whenever I'm in the Blender scene, because otherwise program will like run really slow if I try to play the animation in the viewport, but you win some, you lose some, right? So whenever you shove this out, make sure that you take exactly half or quarter. So for example, if I want to shove it out here, if I have my little face that I draw again, then I offset it by 2048, I know that I'm exactly on the half. I've shoved exactly half of the image out, and it comes back in here, and I can be very numerical. And then what I did was I copied that a bunch of times, and I applied some like little motion blur with motion blur. I'm still not sure if I'm gonna do this in the final film or if I'm gonna do this in comp rather, but for the preview reasons, I chose to do motion blur. And then I basically took this, blurred it, and I shoved it, not by half, but always in 512 pixel increments off to the right. So as you see, click, click, click. This is all shoving itself. There's like a little ridge here with smaller stones where you can see it quite nicely. Shoving itself out and back in. And when we reach this one, the next one here will be back at the starting frame. Then what I did in Blender is I chose, I have the floor object selected here. Let me put those geometry markers on again. And you can go to shading. And you see here, if you click an object and click on shading, this is the shader. I basically chose base color, and I chose, let me just do it again so you see how exactly I did it. If you click on base color, you select image texture, and then this little node here appears, and you click open. And instead of just one image, you just select, this is the wrong ones, I'm just demonstrating it. You select all of them, all the frames that you want, and import it. And then Blender will automatically put a little timeline in there where all those images are imported as a timeline. Then you click cyclic, which means it doesn't happen one time. It happens like, it always loops, similar as with the buildings that we just demonstrated. And also important, and also like good if you want to save memory space, You can toggle off auto refresh. You will only see the texture changing in the viewport if you toggle on auto refresh. And also, of course, very important is to put the mode on repeat. That means like the texture will be looping around as often as you want. I mapped it on the street, which is also important to know, with another camera. I really like the camera projection in Blender. So it takes a while again. So you see, this is the street texture. If I move the camera in position, or if I turn it, the street will change and the texture. So this is the camera that projects the texture on the street. Doesn't really matter the aperture that you choose for the camera. It will always project texture as it is. And yeah, that's how you build a looping scene in Blender. Basically for this side, this is the same principle. I made a little bit of a more simple construction here since I don't have like any projection cameras. These are just like planes with cameras with a texture mapped planar, and this is another like parent object in order for me to be able to easily control the position of those. And there you go, Bob's your uncle. It's a scene. And the little animation here, this is, you see, now it's chugging along. So let me switch the floor off again. This is better. This is a little animation that I made. Gonna be much more where this came from very soon. And yeah, let's hope that this was an interesting and informative little video for all you guys. Take care, wash your hands, and yeah, don't worry too much. Gonna be all fine again very soon. All right, see you guys very soon.